West. So I interviewed Cornel West recently. I hope you guys have enjoyed those clips. Like Eric did a really good job clipping up different questions and just putting them out as solo clips. So people don't have to go back through the whole interview to find what did Dr. West say about this issue or that issue. You just have the clip that you can go to, and there it is. So there's your answers to that question. But Cornel West recently went on to, I don't know what this is. Why is that there? Oh yeah, this isn't the Fox one. I put the wrong one here, but we're going to go through both. We're going to do both. I'll find the Fox one. Eric, can you go on Twitter and type in Cornel West Fox? Because I want to get that one too. But I'll go ahead and play this one. So Cornel West had two interviews. He had the one on CNN and he had the one on Fox News. I'm going to start with the CNN one first, and then we'll get to Fox News, because this is going to prove a point when people say that you should run third party or independent because it's not going to get the attention from mainstream media. And I always argued that if you had someone who had a big name that ran third party, that could change. Just like if Jesse Ventura would have decided to run in 2020, that could have changed a lot of things. And so now we see that this is definitely the case. Someone who's well known, like Cornel West, immediately got attention from mainstream media when he announced. Immediately he was on mainstream media. So let's start off with these clips here from CNN when he talks about the poor and the working class, and then we'll move on to Fox News.
The growing Republican field for president is dominating the headlines, but other candidates are hoping the crowded field paves the way for another choice. The total number of Republican candidates right now stands at 11. Two Democrats are challenging Biden for the White House, RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson. And then there is Cornel West. He announced last week that he's going to run on a third-party ticket. Now he is switching parties. Cornel West joins me now. Thank you so much for joining me, sir. You moved from the People's Party to the Green Party this week, and it makes you much more likely you're going to be on the ballot in a majority of states. Is that why you switched?
Well, I just want to make sure that poor and working people are at the very center of this discussion. But I want to begin by wishing you a happy birthday.
Thank you, sir.
Indeed. But what the problem is, we have a two-party system that doesn't highlight the precious poor and working people. I'm thinking of Brother Michael and Brother Eddie right now in Rankin County, Mississippi. Neither party speaks to his situation. We got brown brothers and sisters in the borough. We got poor whites in West Virginia. Neither party, both parties tied to Wall Street, Pentagon, both parties so obsessed with the professional managerial class, they lose sight of poor people and working people.
Yep.
The best of America. And that's what my campaign is about, my dear Sister Dana. I want to introduce America to the best of itself, the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. and Rabbi Heschel and Dorothy Day and Edward Said and Grace Lee Boggs and Luisa Marino. We've had some major voices concerned about poor and working people, not just here, but the militarism around the world and the victims of that militarism around the world. And so we're going to have a robust conversation in this presidential political season.
Mm-hmm. Dana always looks uncomfortable. It seems like no matter who she interviews, this woman never looks comfortable.
You have gotten the question many times. I've heard you being asked about being a spoiler, and you reject that argument, a spoiler for Joe Biden in 2024. But I want to give our viewers a little bit of history. In 2016, Jill Stein was on the ballot for the Green Party, and Donald Trump ended up winning in a nail biter, particularly in some of the key states that you're looking at right now. I'm putting up on the screen just so you know.
So this is what they're trying to do. Now they're trying to put fear into the American people. Oh, Jill Stein caused Donald Trump to win. No, Donald Trump won because he spoke to people in the Rust Belt, and particularly he spoke to the needs of the people in the Rust Belt, just as Bernie Sanders did. But she wants to bring up 2016, and she wants to leave out the fact that Bernie Sanders won every county in West Virginia, and the superdelegates decided to give West Virginia to Hillary Clinton anyway. Someone who did not speak to the needs of the people in the Rust Belt. So when you look at these states here, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, that's what you have to keep in mind. So this is Dana doing the job of the establishment in the Democratic Party to try to warn the viewers, well, you're just going to help people get Donald Trump.
number of votes that.
And we'll go on to the next part here, because these are in different little segments here.
Donald Trump's margin there. What's to say, despite your convictions and your argument about the two parties not being the way to go, what's to say what I just showed on the screen won't happen with Cornel West on the ballot and not Jill Stein?
I mean, one, that, my dear sister Jill Stein, who got 1.07% of the vote, my dear brother Ralph Nader, who got more, he got about 4%, but you don't look to the weakest candidates as the full explanation as to why you lose. Sister Hillary Clinton lost because she was not a good candidate. She didn't go to Wisconsin, and you know even better than all of us all the various factors that go into why she also didn't lose, not just that one factor. So the idea of putting all the responsibility on the candidates who get the fewest votes compared to the other big two is just a way of rationalizing a two-party system that has become more and more outdated and antiquated, both tied to big money and big military, and they don't allow us to speak to 60% of our fellow citizens who are wrestling every day trying to put money on the table and waiting for the next check, and the gross wealth inequality continues. And the military budget continues to expand. We saw this with Brother Biden. But I do want to say this, though, just quickly, that this campaign is also about getting beyond hatred and revenge. You see, I don't hate Brother Trump. I hate his lies and his gangster neo-fascism. I don't hate Brother Biden. I hate his hypocrisy, and I hate his milquetoast neoliberal policy. And we have to be able to engage in a public conversation. It gets beyond eye for an eye and this vicious kind of revenge so that it reinforces the distrust and the paranoia. And that's a immeasurable dimension. That's an invisible dimension of my campaign that's going to set a different kind of tone of what my brother Cliff West called a paradigm shift in American politics. 'Cause I'm a jazz man in the world of politics, and the jazz man is always about improvisation, always about compassion, always about style, and always about a smile.
So that piece I think is important for people to understand. You know, it's not about hatred, so to speak. It's about the policies, at least it is for Dr. West. Now they go on here.
You made the arguments during the 2020 campaign similar to what I'm hearing you make now when you were backing other candidates, Bernie Sanders to be precise. But you did end up voting for Joe Biden because you said 4 more years of Donald Trump could be worse. Why isn't that the case for you this time around?
Well, I learned from my very dear brother, Bernie Sanders. You know, I have a very profound respect for him, even as we disagree on a number of things. But I'm thoroughly convinced he was treated unjustly. I'm thoroughly convinced that the corporate wing of the Democratic Party will always use the progressive wing as a kind of window dressing. The progressive wing will never triumph. We almost triumphed, and then the neoliberals came together after the call by Obama to Amy and Pete and the others. And therefore, I'm thoroughly convinced that first, pushing back Trump, that's exactly what I tried to do, part of an anti-fascist coalition. But then I began to see you never, ever defeat fascism with a milquetoast neoliberalism that doesn't have vision and passion. The only way you defeat fascism that is coming to America, if we do not fight, is a strong vision, strong passion, and then I'm going, as I've said, to Trump country itself. I'm going to my white brothers and sisters and say, don't scapegoat the most vulnerable, confront the most powerful. There's another way of looking at that.
Well, I want to ask you.
So hold on to that point there where Dr. West mentions fascism and that he's going to Trump country, because I have another clip I'm going to show you from Pasta's interview with Dr. West, where Pasta is actually giving Dr. West a little bit of advice about the rhetoric to use if you are going into Trump country. And I think this is important for people to hear, because let's remember Bernie Sanders also went into, well, at that time it wasn't Trump country, but went into those same areas that Donald Trump went into. So I think this whole idea that these third-party candidates are the reason why we got Donald Trump, it's BS. The reason why we got Donald Trump is because the American people, some of them who had voted for Barack Obama twice, saw that their material conditions were not improving. They saw that their wages were not increasing. They saw that they were still struggling just to get by after we just had a president for 8 years in a row who ran on hope and change. And yes, we can. So people have to understand that. And this is where you got to get out of this mindset of this, I'm this blue party mentality or this red party mentality. You have to get out of that mindset and look at the material conditions that are presented before you today. And not just for simp for a party, just because that's the party you're a part of.
Forgive me for interrupting, but I was going to ask you about that because you mentioned to my colleague Jake Tapper that you're going to go to Trump country. What specifically do you think that people who are ardent Trump supporters are going to be receptive to in your message?
The economy, you dummy. See, this is why I could never be on CNN. This is why I could not, there's no way. But like, what kind of question is that? The economy, the inflation, the high gas prices that people had, the wage is not increasing. What are you talking about, Dana? This is that partisan mindset to where if you are a Democrat, you can be convinced that whatever the other party wants or needs cannot in any way, shape, or form align with your own needs. And that's actually not true. Both parties support corporate interest. Both parties put the people last. The differences come in a lot of times with the social issues. I even argue about this difference of big government versus little government, because some of the same people who tell me they're against big government, their support funding the police state. That's big government. I think a lot of people have been brainwashed and have been conditioned that you have to be a part of one of these two parties, or else it will be your fault if things don't go the way that it should for the American people. It's not our fault. And I'm here to tell you, as someone who has been a voter for years, it's not our fault. These parties have been bought by these corporations. They've been bought by Wall Street. They've been bought by the military industrial complex. And every time we go out and vote and think that our vote is really going to make a difference, but it's not up to us. I've been telling people this for a long time. These people are handpicked, chosen. The Democratic Party has already told you that Joe Biden is going to be the nominee and there's not going to be any debates. What else more do people need to see to understand that we don't really have as much choice as we think that we do? That's the big part of the problem.
Well, one, I don't believe that they're homogeneous and monolithic. About 1 out of 10 of them voted for Brother Bernie himself. They were looking for an alternative because they see through the hypocrisy of the Democratic Party, talking about justice on the one hand, but tied to big money on the other. And so I want to go back to those folk and recognize when I see a Trump supporter, I don't see a stereotype. I see a human being, many of them who are wounded, and too many of them follow a neo-fascist.
Okay, now we're going to go into this Fox interview. Let me go ahead and grab that link here, because now you have it so that Dr. West has not just been on to CNN. He's also been on Fox News. So I think people need to see this as well. Now, Laura Ingraham interviewed Dr. West here. CJ, my comrade from RBN, he tweeted this, says Dr. West goes on Fox News. Listen to this.
Oklahoma. He was raised in Sacramento. Even before he finished, he became involved in the civil rights movement. He attended organizing.
Might need a volume booster on this one, Eric. Thank you.
Protests. He finished Harvard in just 3 years, graduating magna cum laude. Then he went on to Princeton, where he got his master's and his PhD. He's taught at Harvard, at Yale, and at Princeton University. He made cameos in 2 Matrix films, but also put out a hip-hop album. And he was frequently a guest on this very show. Having done all that, he's now making a run for the White House.
I enter in the quest for truth. I enter in the quest for justice. And the presidency is just one vehicle to pursue that truth and justice, what I've been trying to do all of my life.
Joining me now, Dr. Cornel West, 2024 presidential candidate for the Green Party. Professor West, it's great to see you tonight. It's really great to have you back on the show. The last time you were here, I think it was as a 2020 Bernie Sanders surrogate. So things have changed a little bit. So, you know, why do you think so many of the... I was laughing about that. Like Bernie Sanders.
Indeed. No,
seems like
Brother Bernie's my dear brother. But first, I want to thank you for having me on, Sister Laura. Very much so. But no, Bernie got shut down by the corporate wing of the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party is so tied to Wall Street, so tied to the Pentagon, that I thought it very important to build on the richer legacy that has shaped and molded me. Not just the West family, not just Shiloh Baptist Church on the chocolate side of Sacramento, but the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. and Rabbi Heschel and Edward Said and Dorothy Day and Grace Lee Boggs. So it's this legacy spills over now into electoral politics, because I'm thoroughly convinced, my dear sister, that the two-party system stands in the way for the empowerment of precious poor people and precious working people. And I am fundamentally committed to the plight of the least of these, not just here and around the world. I'm against the militarism abroad. I'm against the organized greed. I'm against the routinized indifference to the vulnerable, no matter what color they are, no matter what gender, no matter what sexual orientation.
Dr. West, I know you support drawing this Ukraine conflict to a close. And just tonight, the Washington Post is reporting that the Biden administration is giving backing to a plan that would remove barriers to Ukraine's entry into NATO without setting a timeline for its admission. So the Democrat Party is obviously all in, as are many Republicans, not Donald Trump. I don't think Ron DeSantis, but pretty much all the other Republicans are for the U.S. being on the hook for perpetually defending Ukraine from the aggression of any other country. Why is that interventionism, let's focus on the Democrat Party, at the cornerstone now of who they are really in foreign policy? How did that happen and why?
Well, I mean, the Democratic Party has a long history of being committed to wars. Look at, you can go back all the way to Vietnam. But unfortunately, we have to tell the truth. NATO, the promise would be that NATO would not move 1 inch against or toward Russian territory. A few years later, 14 former Soviet countries part of NATO. So that you can imagine any empire, the American empire, the most powerful, and it's, you know the history of invasion and occupation, but you would probably agree that if there were Russian missiles in Mexico, Russian missiles in Canada, it would be blown to smithereens very, very quickly. Why? Because empires behave that way. Now, if you're a radical Democrat, you have a critique of the imperial overlay of your country. That includes organized greed at the top with Wall Street, and it includes the war profiteers.
I would say, Cornel,
I'm in solidarity with the suffering of the Ukrainian people, but we've got to bring that war to a stop, cease fire, and then proceed diplomatically and transfer some of those funds from the military to investment in jobs and health care and quality education and decent homes.
Dr. West, one thing I'm very curious about, because on these seminal issues, like you and I disagree on a lot, but you and I actually agree on a lot. On the surveillance state, on the perpetual war, on the Wall Street influence in politics. We agree on a lot of things. To me, it seems like you're closer in many ways to populist conservatives on those types of issues than you are the modern Democrat Party. And I know you're running as a Green, but can't you tonight say that Donald Trump did more for African Americans in the inner city with increased real median income, increased entrepreneurial opportunities, criminal justice reform, all the things that he did when he was president, given all the investigations, all the stuff that was happening? Can't you recognize that he actually was doing his best at the time to stand up for disenfranchised people with an economy that was actually growing for the first time?
You see what she's trying to do here, right? You see how she did that pivot? So she mentions the war in Ukraine. right? Because for the most part, it does seem like a lot of people in the Democratic Party are not calling for some type of peace, right? They agree to continue to give Ukraine this blank check, etc. Or they agree that we need to find a way to shut down Russia. So you see what she just did, right? Okay, so she used the issue with the war to pivot to, actually, you may be more aligned with conservatives than the Democratic Party. Okay, so that doesn't really matter, Laura, because to her point, he's running as a Green. He's running as a third party candidate. And if people actually took the time and looked at the Green Party's platform, then they would realize that obviously they're not for these wars. Don't even mention Howie Hawkins. That's a whole other thing. We're not even going to get into that tonight. Okay, I'm just going ahead and mention that now. We're not going to get into that tonight. But that's what people have to understand. So you see what she's trying to do. And then she goes from that to, well, won't you say that Donald Trump did more for Black people and for, you know, these criminal justice reforms and da-da-da. You see how she did that pivot? Remember, it is Fox News. So she's still going to make sure she look out for her base.
For real median income was growing for all demographic groups.
But you have to acknowledge that the grotesque wealth inequality was increasing even as those low unemployment rates were in place. Now, I give him credit for the low unemployment rates, but the problem with Brother Trump, and it's very important to keep in mind, you know, we got to do away with all this hatred and revenge. I don't hate Brother Trump. I hate the lies, and I hate the gangster activity, and I hate the kind of neo-fascist language he uses. When he trashes Muslims, when he trashes, calling black folk, football players, sons of B-I-T-C-A. No, his language is neo-fascist, and he was still tied to big military, still allowing Wall Street to get away. That's where you and I would disagree. That's where we disagree.
Yeah,
but I'll
Cornel,
say this.
The point is that both Joe Biden and Donald Trump back Wall Street. Both of them still support the corporate powers that be. So there's that, Laura.
I don't hate Biden, but I hate Biden's hypocrisy.
Well, I know,
hate his neoliberal policies.
Yeah, but the surveillance state that you and I, and I think a lot of conservatives have grown incredibly mistrustful of, and the outsized influence of the Pentagon, they were all turned against Trump. So you have to acknowledge that. Milley, the whole Milley apparatus, they were all.
So you see what she's doing now? She's bringing up another issue where she knows they agree on the surveillance state. Now she's trying to say, so you got to say that Donald Trump, you know, wouldn't you say this? She's trying to get him to publicly admit that Donald Trump was better for the American people than Joe Biden. And then, you know, she can say, oh, well, you're more aligned with the conservatives. You might as well just run as a conservative, see?
All against Trump. All of them. Why were they against Trump if he was a big threat?
It's because that neoliberal apparatus wanted to retain its status, and Trump came in as a critic from the right wing.
Right.
And that's where the neo-fascism comes in, by trashing the immigrants, trashing too many precious gay brothers and lesbian sisters and so forth.
I know that's your line.
He didn't say too many nice things. He didn't say too many nice things about my and even the people who support. But I can tell you this. As a presidential candidate, I'm going straight into Brother Trump's country, and I'm going to tell the brothers and sisters of all colors, I want you not to scapegoat the most vulnerable. I want you to confront the most powerful. That's Wall Street. That's Silicon Valley. That's the war profiteers of Pentagon.
Yeah.
That's where
see, now she has to cut him off because he's starting to call out the 1%. Because that's the way this two-party system works, right? Like the Democratic Party, they want you to hate the Trump-like peeps. They want you to hate the Republicans. The Republicans want you to hate the Democrats. And that's how it works. As long as you're hating someone else, like they want you to hate the people who are actually scapegoats. They want you to hate the immigrants. They want you to hate Black people. They want you to hate people that are disabled. Like they want you to hate everybody else except for the people that, and I wouldn't say hate, I want you to hate anybody, but the people that you should be focusing on, the people who are at the tippity top. It's not the people who is your neighbor. It's not the people that are working next door to you at your job, at the manufacturing plant. It's not your coworker at Dunkin' Donuts. It's not your coworker at these schools. It's not your classmate. It's the people at the very top that you should be focusing on that control so much. And we have so little. So she has to cut him off now because he's bringing it back up to the wealth distribution and the real power
think we need to
They're going to hate you. They're going to hate you, and they're going to hate Trump.
I welcome their
I think that's
hostility
good.
because as
I want to ask you.
Yes,
I want to ask you about an open border. I mean, take it away from Trump. The border is essentially open today. If you want to come into the country, you can come in, which the liberals have all said they're always for. They like the idea of an open border.
So now she's going to bring in immigration. See, I told you she's still trying to appeal to her base, but you got to understand, first of all, the border is not open. They make it seem like there's no type of barrier. That is not true. Joe Biden has been building on to Donald Trump's wall. Are people still getting through? Absolutely. People always find ways to get through. But to use this phrase, which I've seen them use a lot on Fox News, to say the border is just wide open and there's no type of protection, that is not true. We just got to call it what it is. Yes, people are still able to get across, but to sit here and pretend like Joe Biden is not actually adding on to Trump's border wall is BS. And that's why you can't trust mainstream media.
Do you think an open border has helped the plight of African Americans in cities like Chicago, in New York, St. Louis, Baltimore, Oakland, San Francisco? Has it helped their standard of living?
Listen to how she phrased the question, guys. Listen to how she framed it. Do you think an open border? So you have to push back on the framing first.
Well, I mean, one is that you first always have to begin at the top. You have to look at the ways in which the business people and the property owners bring in cheap labor in order to keep the wages low. That's why I support not just trade union movements. That's why I support the various strikes that's on the way this summer to make sure working people gain concessions because
you sound
those
like
at the
Ron
top
DeSantis.
seem to be so greedy. They
That's
seem to be
what Ron
so
DeSantis
greedy.
says.
No, but
Yeah.
no.
See what she's doing? You see this? Oh, you sound like one of the other conservative politicians.
Oh, no, but the problem with DeSantis is he's got this
xenophobic,
trying to
lower
he's got
wages,
this xenophobic
Cornel.
dimension to it. But I want the immigrants
There's a lot of
and the
agreement
workers
here.
of all colors to come together against the bosses. DeSantis still has too much xenophobia for me. And that's a radical difference between right-wing populists and highly left-oriented people in love with poor and working people no matter what color.
Cornel, I think that, and may I call you Cornel? I always call you Dr. White. Cornel,
Oh, absolutely.
Dr.
Absolutely, my dear. Absolutely.
Do you think there are ways for the left-wing populists and the right-wing or conservative populists can work together on these issues where there is common ground, whether it's on the war front
there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. My dear brother Clifton West has said that what we need is a paradigm shift in politics. What we need is an ideological realignment of the landscape. And what that means with those who have critiques of predatory capitalist processes, those who have critiques of white supremacy, you and I are going to fight on the vicious legacy of white supremacy because the racism is still operating, not as intense as it was 75 years ago, but it's still there in so many different ways. I think of what's happening right now with my two dear brothers in Mississippi. We have to, but also I don't downplay the vicious attacks on my gay brothers and lesbian sisters and trans and the defense of women and women having control over their bodies and reproductive rights.
Do you think, you know what I don't know your view on, Cornel, is
see, now she has to interrupt again because he's starting to bring up social issues.
Your view on trans athletes in women's sports, because you are a big champion of women. We disagree on the abortion issue, but you are a big champion of women, and I appreciate that. I was a female athlete, my day, ages ago. But what about that?
Yes.
Do you think trans men who are biological men should be in the Wimbledon finals?
You know, I mean, I am committed to the dignity of precious trans folk because they're so vulnerable, and I just hate to see them
don't have a shot then
and attacked. No, okay. but I'm also willing to learn and listen in the argument because I think it depends on case to case and context to context. I just want to make sure that the most vulnerable are never, ever
women are
trashed.
vulnerable. Yeah, women are vulnerable. If they're competing against men in most sports.
And now she's going to put words into his mouth. So yeah, that's Fox News. This is what they do. Like CNN, you just saw two different interviews with Dr. West, one on CNN, one on Fox News. Notice that both of them tried to put words into his mouth, tried to make it seem like you should be afraid of him running as a third party candidate because, oh God, or you're more aligned with the conservatives, or what are you trying to do here? And that's just a big place. A big part of mainstream media is to invoke fear. And this is something I've talked about oftentimes, but Dr. West is used to that. He's been on Fox News and CNN before, so he knows how to push back on those certain things. Now, one thing I will say is when she did say with an open border, if I was him, I think he should have pushed back and said, well, the border isn't open. There are barriers in place. However, people are still able to get through. So yes, we do need to have some type of immigration reform, right? So I would have addressed that a little bit differently. Now, here's another thing where I want to give Pasta from Convo Couch credit for this interview. Please watch the full interview on Convo Couch, but he clipped different segments. And this one is about Dr. West on calling Trump a neo-fascist. And I think that Pasta really brought up a really good point here that I hope that Dr. West will take to heart.
Confusing to me. You have said right out the jump that you are planning to go into Trump land and to speak to Trumpers and try to connect with them. How can you connect with them if you continuously call Trump a neo-fascist? I mean, how are we going to extend an olive branch where we're just pretty much shunning people away? I mean, I would also like to talk about that word neo-fascist when we're done, because I think it's a BS word. It is absent from the original meaning of fascism, which is actually corporatism, the merger of state and corporations, where we keep our eye on the prize. Neo-fascist is more of a term where we look at our citizens. It seems like it's been weaponized. But first things first, how do we connect with Trumpers, Dr. West, if we're going to just shun them right off the bat?
I thought this was a very good question. And I think more people need to pay attention to this. I think it's true. Like, we do have to be. The thing is, if you are going to go into Trump country and you're using the phrase that Trump was a fascist, people are going to tune out. They're not going to hear anything else you have to say after that, even though you may have really good things to say that could win them over. So I think the way you lead these conversations and the way that you frame things is very important, which means, and some people may not like to do this, but this means that you may have to change your communication style to the audience that you are addressing. This is something they taught us in undergrad in my communications class. It's not always easy to do, but one of the things that they do teach you, and journalists and reporters are good at this, you have to learn how to adapt your style of communication and even your vocabulary sometimes to the audience that you are addressing at that point in time. The way that you speak to me may not be the same way you're going to speak to the president of the United States. The way that I would speak to my former students is not the way that I would address someone like Dr. West. Does that make sense? So you have to tailor things to the audience. But listen to this, because I thought this was really important.
Oh, but I'm not shunning them at all, though, brother. The first thing you do when you approach another person is you don't see a stereotype, you see a human being. And you zero in on their wounds and their scars, but also their perceptions of the world. But you have to be honest. I have to be honest in terms of how I understand the world. You see, so when I come in and I've already honestly said, well, I think the Pied Piper that you're following at the moment is a gangster. And I define what gangster activity is: saying and doing things with no accountability, no answerability, taking no responsibility. And then I say, as a neo-fascist, neo-fascism is scapegoating the most vulnerable. So you can attack the immigrants, you can attack black folk, you can attack gays and lesbians, rather than confronting the most powerful. And the most powerful is Wall Street and military, not in rhetoric, but in your policies. In your policies. So if you, so I would tell him, look at Brother Trump and myself in terms of militarism. Now he says that he's a populist. He says that he wants to pull back on big military, but every budget was a expansion of the military budget. Every move was an attempt to justify, put it this way, that he so often would want to justify that expansionism, just like the Democrats. I mean, Democrats are tied to big military too, so I'd have to be honest. So in that sense, it's not an attempt to smear and to trash. It's being very honest and candid, and they can come right back at me and use certain categories and certain names, and I would say, I'm glad you're honest about what you think about me. Now let me tell you why you're wrong. If you think Brother Trump is not a gangster, tell me what your definition of gangster. If you think he's not a neo-fascist, tell me what your definition of neo-fascism is. Now that's part of what we'll do today in terms of your definition of neo-fascism is more corporatist and so forth and so on. But mine is using the flag, using narrow forms of patriotism to mobilize citizens, usually feeling as if they're wounded and under attack, and then scapegoating the most vulnerable. That's what we saw in fascism of the past. It could be Jews in Germany and so forth. So that in that sense, you can't have a genuine Socratic dialogue or conversation if you're not honest and candid about what your perception is at the moment. Now, I might be wrong. I'm there to learn and listen from the Trump brothers and sisters, right? I might be wrong. But when I see xenophobia, when I see racism, when I see transphobia, when I see homophobia, I call it out. They say, well, Brother West, it's not that. Then convince me. But most importantly, I'm showing them I care about their suffering, and I want to make sure all of them as human beings and fellow citizens gain access to Medicare quality, education quality, jobs with a living wage, safe community, the same thing that any other fellow citizen deserves or any other human being deserves. So that's the beginning of that dialogue, my brother.
Okay, but
so I'm gonna play Pasta's concern, because Pasta has been, I guess, like, you know, he's reported in those areas, and his concern about the rhetoric. Listen to this.
See, listen, I used to use this term. I do a lot of work in Latin America, right? I wanted to send you this video I have of Cuba, of me trying to build a bridge where I go to Cuba and I bring a lot of baseball equipment and bats and balls. And I'm just trying to humanize people, to get that whole anti-communist sentiment out of their mind. Right. Now, the first thing I did, Dr. West, is I removed the term that is often used. It was used by Castro. It's gusano. It's calling people a worm, right? But if I want to convince and I want to have conversations with Marco Rubio, if I see him, or Paulina Aguilar, or Bob Menendez, if I use that word gusano, it immediately shuts things down. And I feel that's what neo-fascism does. But I think the real part where people have a problem with is that you call Brother Biden a neoliberal disaster, when if you just put it on paper right now, and I'll tell you this right now, I think that sometimes people look at this and they're like, well, Dr. West is calling him a neoliberal disaster and calls Trump a neo-fascist, when the corporate entities are way more invested in President Biden than they are Donald Trump, that he's kind of carrying a little water for Biden, and he's making that excuse that it was okay to vote for Biden over Donald Trump, which I think, you know, was completely wrong. If you told me today, and I'm never going to vote for Biden, I'm never going to vote for Donald Trump, but if you put a gun to my head, Dr. West, and said I had to vote for either one of the two, I'm voting for Donald Trump. We're on the brink of World War III here now. Can you see the hypocrisy there? And can you maybe square that circle right there and kind of give us a little insight to this whole, like, Biden gets this treatment, but Trump gets that treatment?
So here's my take on this. I don't trust either one of them. I don't trust Joe Biden or Donald Trump. I don't trust either one. But I will say this. I think that when Dr. West and I had this conversation last year, I asked him if he thought if Joe Biden was a fascist, and he said no. And I told him I think Joe Biden is. And I did give him examples. And one of the examples I pointed to were the mandates. Not going to go too deep in this because it's YouTube. I am on YouTube. I know I'm on Rumble, but I'm also on YouTube. But I'm not going to go too deep into this. But I brought up the example of the crime bill. I brought up the example of the mandates. And some people say, well, that was left up to the state. No, remember, Joe Biden actually also implemented that for federal contractors. So it wasn't just left up to the governors of these states as well. So there were examples to point to. And I did disagree with him in reference to that. I don't think that Joe Biden is not a fascist. But that's just me. I think that there's a difference. I think there's overt and there's covert, right? Just like there's overt racism, which is really bold and loud. It's in your face. Covert racism is more subdued. Sometimes it's hard to tell that it's actually racism. It can be mistaken as something else. And I've said this before, that Donald Trump was overt, but Joe Biden was covert. But they were both still doing some of the same things. And I think that's something to look at and to focus on. So I think what Pasta is trying to relay here to Dr. West is that if you do go into those areas and you refer to Donald Trump as a fascist, you are going to lose their ear and they're not going to want to listen to anything else you have to say. So I get that as well. I think, again, you have to tailor your communication to your audience. Now, I want you to watch this interview because that's just a clip. The full interview is on the Convo Couch. But there's something else that's a problem here. And Pasta shouted this out. We all know that YouTube has these issues with censorship. We know that. We know that YouTube will shadow ban people. But apparently, so is Rumble. Because apparently, there's something about this interview that Pasta had with Dr. Cornel West. And Rumble, apparently, for whatever reason, is shadow banning it. Not kidding you. I'm not even talking about YouTube. I'm talking about Rumble. Listen to this. So Pasta actually went through this. They're going to walk you through it. Watch how that interview with Dr. West is shadow banned on Rumble. Watch this.
Put Dr. Cornel West. Well, Cornel West. Let's try Cornel West. All right. So we're not.
So this is Rumble, and they entered in the search term Cornel West. By the way, I tried this on my own as well, and the same thing happened.
Not there. Let's scroll through this now. Not there. Not there. Keep going. Keep scrolling. Not there. Not there. Not there. There's RBN stuff.
Indian News Network.
Hey, Indian News Network. There's RBN. Keep scrolling. Oh, he's running. Oh, there's due dissidence. All right, cool, cool. Couple due dissidence. Keep scrolling. More due dissidence. Indian News Network. RBN. Keep scrolling. Keep scrolling.
Useful idiots.
Keep scrolling. Useful idiots. JB Font. Progressive Toast. All right, go to second page. Surely we must be on the second page. Due dissidence. RBN. Keep going, guys. RBN. RBN. Who else? Jimmy. Oh, wait. Let's go up quick. Jimmy Dore Show. Okay.
Progressive
Soapbox. Okay. Revolutionary Blackout. Sticks, Heads, and Hammer. There's RBN. Due dissidence. Okay. All right.
All right. Now this is most relevant. Let's try looking at.
Wait. Let's keep going though. Let's keep going.
You want to keep going? You want to keep going?
Because
so they're doing two searches. There's one that's most relevant and there's one that's most recent. But just keep watching this.
Mine should be relevant. Why wouldn't mine be relevant?
I was going to say let's just do most recent because some of these are 10 days ago. Let's check. Do you want to keep going?
Go number 3. No, because it's got most relevant and it should have showed up by now. Breaking Points, Stan Nauman. Most people are going to just put that in there and check. Denise DeSouza. These are years ago. Some of them. All right. Yeah. Okay. Indy Left. Okay. Due dissidence. Let's keep going. Let's see if I'm on here at all. Let's just see if I'm on here at all. Keep going. Keep going. Nope, I'm not there. Go number 4. Okay.
There's me.
There's Sabby Sabs. She's deep. I mean, buried. Jordan.
Well, she showed up on the first page too, though.
Yeah. Keep going. Yeah, she was on the first page. JB Font.
Generation Change.
Majority Report. Let's get him in there. Okay. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. All right. Wait. I got to be somewhere. No? Okay. We Are the News. People's Party. Sticks, Head, and Hammer now. Heartlands. Okay. Let's go number 5. I surely got to be on the 5th page, right?
There's me again.
No, not seeing anything.
Sabs. There's Carolyn Bursenko, whatever her name is. DJ Elf had one. Okay.
And now we're getting into older videos because this video of mine, Call for Peace, Cornel West and Medea Benjamin, that's from 5 months ago. So just FYI.
Okay. All right. Okay. RBN again. RBN. Okay.
All right. There's Candace Owens. Okay. Now this is relevant search. So maybe since your video was only like 2 days ago, it'll show up in most recent.
No, because they had videos that were up. The due dissident ones that were after mine yesterday were on the second page.
I know, but I mean it's most recent, so it should surely be up on the first page.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say, it should be here, and I know it's going to be here eventually by most recent. But the factor, what decides what is relevant?
Well,
there's ones with 29 views, 9 views, 9 views. There's videos up there that have hardly any freaking views. How many do we have on our on the convo couch right now?
So some of these videos that are showing up on the first and second page have very few views. So that's another thing. Again, this is Rumble for those just joining. This is not YouTube.
I'm going to tell you how many we have. I'll go to real quick.
Well, the reason I want to bring up most recent because I don't think you're right about it.
Because hopefully
I don't think you're right.
So he's going to go to most recent, and let's see.
4 days ago is longer. Is longer than when we get.
Okay, so it's almost 1.5.
Sorry, let's go right here.
It's Sabs. 4 days ago is longer. Is longer than when we get.
Okay, so it's almost 1.5. So we're not on. Okay, we're not even on. We're not even relevant.
We're not on most. We're not even on most recent.
They don't even show up.
6 days. Look at that.
So that was just something that I wanted to show you there. I don't know what's going on over at Rumble, but that was kind of strange that like they don't even appear at all. And channels with less subscribers than the Convo Couch on Rumble do appear. So what is it about that particular interview? It seems to be buried on Rumble. So I sincerely hope that Rumble is not starting to follow YouTube's lead and shadow ban people and suppress people. I sincerely hope, because that is a form of censorship to me. So I don't know. Go check out the Convo Couch on YouTube, also on Rumble. I think they're still demonetized on YouTube. So go check them out on Rumble and give them some love over there. But yeah, couple of things from those interviews. There's some things I think Dr. West can work on, like Pasta mentioned about the phrase, the terms that he's using. If you're going to go talk to that community, that type of thing. But I think one of the things we did see is that when it comes to mainstream media, whether it's CNN or Fox News, they both just play to their audience, obviously, and try to make the person who is their guest that is going against what their audience want look like the bad guy. And that's just how both of them work, to be honest. All right, let me get to some of the comments and then we'll move on. Charlotte says AFL-CIO is a union umbrella organization. They're not actually a union. They never, I think you mean never. They never consult with their members. It's a small cohort of insiders doing this dirty scam. I'll bet the nurses are pissed. See what I mean? Shout out to Joey Peltier for becoming a Sabby member. Whoop, whoop. Shout out to Linda Bonnie Bostrom for becoming a Sabby member. Whoop. Shout out to Axel Strife 0 for becoming a Sabby member. Whoop, whoop. Shout out. Mikey G says, I only watch PBS, NPR, and C-SPAN, LOL. All publicly funded, not corporate funded. I think it came out recently that NPR was funded by the government, though. And they didn't like that too much on Twitter. They were not too happy with Elon for putting that label next to their account. Shout out to Kit from Hardlands Media. JB, my comrade from RBN, says she's no different than liberals. The liberals tried to get Cornel West to run as a Democrat. Laura is trying to get him to endorse the GOP. And thank you for the super chat, Perry Stein.